You're listening to the Savage Lovecast, Dan Savage's sex and relationship show for grown-ups. If you're under 18, get out of here, youngin'.
If you're stuck in a relationship quandary, or if you're looking for sexual harmony, well, there's nothing you can't ask on the Savage Lovecast.
Hiking the Appalachian Trail. I thought it would stick. In the summer of 2009, Mark Sanford, then the Republican governor of South Carolina, a family values conservative Christian, a married man, 4 kids, disappeared for a week during hurricane season. No one knew where the governor of South Carolina was, including his staff. But his staff had to tell the media something. So his staff said the governor was, quote unquote, hiking the Appalachian Trail. What the governor was actually doing was fucking his Argentinian mistress. It was huge news, and hiking the Appalachian Trail instantly became a euphemism for sneaking out to get some. In the summer of 2009, if you slipped out of a party to go fuck someone and you said, hey, I'm going to go hike the Appalachian Trail, everyone knew what you meant. If you said it now, you would sound like a hallucinating AI chatbot. Hiking the Appalachian Trail had its moment, didn't stick. Lift my luggage. I was sure that one would stick. I thought that gays would make sure it stuck, if only out of spite. George Allen Riekers, co-founder in 1981 of the rabidly anti-gay Family Research Council, a neuropsychologist who worked with NARTH, the National Association for Research and Therapy of Homosexuality, which was a group of quacks that tortured primarily gay teenagers, driving some to suicide in an effort to turn those gay teenagers straight. Riekers was also an expert witness who testified in support of bans on gay people adopting children, and even advocated against allowing gay people, lesbians, to have custody of their own children. Can you guess where this is going? In 2010, George Riekers of the Family Research Council took a boy that he rented off rentboy.com to Europe, which meets the legal definition of sex trafficking now, I guess. Diddy is going to prison for shipping male sex workers across state lines. And George Riekers, he took a male sex worker across an ocean. And when Riekers was ambushed, getting off the plane, when he came back from Europe with his rent boy, Riekers claimed he took this male prostitute with him to Europe because he has a bad back and he needed someone to lift my luggage. What I liked about lift my luggage as a euphemism for fuck my brains out was how it called back to shirt lifter, which was Victorian slang for a homosexual man. A guy would stand behind you, lift your shirt, fuck your ass. Riekers, whose entire professional life was devoted to demonizing gay people, was a gay person. Fired by NARTH, scrubbed from the Family Research Council's website, and for a few months, maybe a year, you could ask someone to lift your luggage for you and they would know what you meant. Not anymore. Didn't stick. Lobster with extra lobster. That one didn't stick either. Wasn't tied to a sex scandal, didn't have that boost. Terry and I were in Iceland a few years ago, hiking the Lugavegger Trail, lifting each other's luggage, and there were these food trucks in Reykjavik where you could order lobster rolls or lobster bisque with extra lobster with extra lobster. Something delicious with more of that delicious something. I thought that was funny. I thought it sounded like it should be a euphemism. Sucking cock is delicious. Sucking 2 cocks? Lobster with extra lobster. Fucked in the ass with 1 dick? Amazing. Fucked in the ass with 2 dicks? Lobster with extra lobster. I tried to make it happen. Talked about it on the show, put it in my column, but unlike pegging and Santorum and monogamish, all of which happened, all of which stuck, lobster with extra lobster didn't happen. Which brings us in a very roundabout way to on biblical grounds. People are using it right now this week, thanks to Angela Paxton, the wife of Texas Lieutenant Governor Ken Paxton, who is one of the most corrupt and odious figures on the right, which is a high fucking bar to clear at the moment. This week, Angela Paxton took to Twitter to announce that she was divorcing Ken. Today, after 38 years of marriage, her statement reads, I filed for divorce on biblical grounds. I believe marriage is a sacred covenant and I have earnestly pursued reconciliation. But in light of recent discoveries, we don't know what Angela discovered recently, but it must have been pretty bad because Angela stood by her husband during an impeachment proceeding he barely survived, one that involved him doing favors for his mistress. So whatever it was that Angela just discovered, it was worse than adultery and graft combined because that wasn't, for her, grounds for divorce just a couple of years ago. Two things about the Paxton divorce. First, earlier this summer, members of the Baptist Church voted overwhelmingly in favor of a resolution calling on the Supreme Court to overturn the Obergefell decision and for states, all of them, to reinstate bans on gay marriage. And I do appreciate how Ken and Angela took this moment, they are Southern Baptists, took this moment to remind everyone that it's not gay marriage that threatens straight marriage. It's assholes like Ken Paxton. And I'm sorry, Angela, you either believe in the sacred sanctity of marriage or you don't. If you believe you deserve an exception when you want to get divorced, which is not allowed on biblical grounds, then you can allow for an exception for me when I want to get married. And second, over the last week, people have been using on biblical grounds as a general all-purpose excuse for why they're backing out of something, not showing up at a party, not showing up to help a friend move, deciding you don't want to be your best friend's maid of honor. Can't do it on biblical grounds. Seems to me, though, on biblical grounds could enter the pablum pantheon of shit people say when they dump you. It could be right up there with, it's not you, it's me. I'm not in the right place right now for a relationship. I'm not over my ex. You know, one of those things people say that are frustratingly vague when viewed one way or mercifully opaque when viewed another way. And so much qualifies as non-biblical. Eating shellfish, not biblical. Shaving your beard, not biblical. Wearing cotton poly blends, not biblical. So maybe next time, instead of ghosting someone, you could say, I've decided not to see you again on biblical grounds. And let it go at that. You know, in my ideal world, a world where these sayings that entered the language, that entered the lexicon, all of them, didn't then quickly exit the lexicon, in a world where they all stuck, people would get texts that read, after lifting your luggage on the Appalachian Trail, I have decided I am ending things on biblical grounds. Thank you for the lobster with extra lobster. I will cherish the memory. But in light of recent discoveries, like this hottie over here, you and I are through. Nobody likes to be dumped, of course, but being dumped with a text like that, put a smile on your face. All right, coming up on today's show, a caller observes that a lot of non-binary AMAB people are out there acting like they get a pass on their shitty behavior simply because they are non-binary. A woman is pregnant and doesn't want to keep the baby, isn't sure what to say to her husband. And a man discovers that his wife actually does like giving blowjobs, just not to him. And the funny dom returns to help a guy figure out what to do after a kink scene, an extreme kink scene, goes wrong. And joining me on the Magnum, disabled author and disability rights activist Andrew Gurza is here to talk about his new book, Notes from a Queer Cripple, How to Cultivate Queer Disabled Joy and Be Hot While Doing It. All that coming up on today's show.
This episode of the Lovecast is brought to you by the good folks at Squarespace. They make it easy to build a beautiful website, blog, or online store. Head on over to squarespace.com/savage for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code SAVAGE to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
This episode is sponsored by HIMS, affordable access to ED treatment, all online. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/savage.
Hi Dan, 25-year-old AMAB non-binary person from the UK here. Bit of a theoretical question about accountability and consent. I was presenting as a cis straight guy until I came out as non-binary about 4 years ago. Shortly after this, I made some poor and impulsive decisions in the bedroom where during consensual sex, I did some kinky stuff that wasn't really discussed before or during, and I really hurt that sexual partner. I'll never forgive myself for what I did, but I have learned from it and dealt with it a lot in therapy. And I know I wouldn't do anything like that again. But I feel a bit disillusioned with the queer community around me, as I'm pretty sure that prior to coming out, I was doing a way better job of thinking about consent and privilege and power in sexual dynamics because I knew how important that was as a straight man. I think that I thought being queer absolved me of having to think about responsibility properly, and that's actually really scary. So now, in the very queer city I live in, I see pretty often AMAB queer people treating their partners in the exact ways that gross straight men do, but aren't held accountable for it in the same way. I think this is because it's too taboo to acknowledge that those queer people were socialized to feel like they have the right to abuse female bodies, just like cis straight men are. How do we change the narrative around accountability without invalidating anybody's queerness and without turning into a bunch of TERFs? I just need other perspectives on this. Can you help me out? Thanks in advance.
However we identify, we're still subject to or in the thrall of, or we were shaped by the ways in which we were socialized in our sexed bodies, by culture, by hormones. Hormones that, however long you've been identifying as non-binary, however many non-binary pride flags you have waving off your porch, still course through your veins. And so, yeah, of course, just coming out as non-binary doesn't absolve you of having to be thoughtful of how you move through the world and blind spots that you may have that were created for you, again, by socialization, culture, hormones. And you didn't do that. You thought coming out as non-binary meant you didn't have to think about power, privilege, having a male-sexed body anymore, and you were just queer and free and equal, and you could do whatever the fuck you wanted. I don't think it follows, though, for you to project that onto all other queer-identified people, however queer-identified they might be. That's something that anybody can fall prey to without realizing that's what they're doing. And assigned female at birth people can be terribly shitty. Lesbian rates of domestic violence are very high. Lesbian drama. Watch The Ultimatum Queer Love if you want to see some lesbians behaving badly. We are all potentially very bad actors. The problem is when men are bad actors, there's a strength advantage, a power advantage, and often if they're with opposite sex partners, people who are assigned female at birth, there is that fear that women and assigned female at birth persons carry into interactions with men where they may not feel in the moment safe saying no or shutting something down or objecting for fear of male violence. Even if the dude or non-binary non-dude that they happen to be with at that moment who's assigned male at birth isn't attempting to leverage that fear or consciously aware that a woman or an assigned female at birth person enters the room with that fear, could be advantaged by it, and the woman could agree to or not object to and wind up getting hurt. Perhaps that's what happened with your partner. And we have to think about all of these things. And we have to continue to think about all of these things even after we come out as queer. So I'm just going to second your point, I guess. What do we do about it? We talk about it. You say to gay white men who think that it's not possible for them to be bigoted because they're gay and they've experienced oppression and discrimination to perhaps think about it because they just said something shitty or racist. I can't remember the numbers of guys, and I think this has gotten through to a lot of gay men in the last 25 years of talking and ranting about it, and everybody else talking and ranting about it. But the number of gay guys that I knew 20 years ago who would put no Asians, no fats, no femmes on their personal ads, and people would say, that's really shitty and bigoted. And he would say, I can't be bigoted, I'm gay. And it's like, no, it's not a cure. It's not an antidote. Still have to be thoughtful and considerate and empathetic and imagine what it might be to be somebody who happened to be effeminate and Asian and bigger to read that. It'd be horrible and painful, and why would you want to do that to somebody? You, in this interaction with this person, where you thought that somehow because you're queer now, you have some sort of permission slip that allows you to bust out kink moves, you now know that that was wrong, and you've held yourself accountable. You should continue to hold yourself accountable. Everybody out there should think about how they move through the world and how they behave with people and how they treat people. And yeah, there may be some guys, some assigned male at birth persons out there who identify now as non-binary, who are engaged in male-coded, male-culturated, male testosterone-soaked dick monster-ish behaviors that they don't think are male behaviors or male-coded or problematic because they themselves don't identify as male anymore. Yeah, there's probably some people out there making those sorts of rationalizations. And what can you say? What can you do besides they should stop?
Hi, Dan. 30-something-year-old woman calling from East Coast. I have a bit of a dilemma. I'm pregnant and I don't want to be. I have the dilemma with my husband and whether to inform him and involve him in the decision to terminate. We've had a pregnancy scare in the past where I immediately wanted to abort, and he, for his own religious reasons, was very much against that. I do not share those reasons. We both don't want children. I've been on birth control the majority of our relationship up until recently for health reasons. In the meantime, we've been pursuing more permanent options, but accidents happen and here we are. I feel very conflicted because I would be pretty devastated if he hid something so important from me. And I respect him and love him, and I would want to involve him. But I feel like I already know what his response is going to be. Even though I do believe both partners should have a say in this, I think the burden does ultimately lie with the childbearing partner. I'm just pretty emotional. I really would hate for this to come between us, and I'm kind of resentful that I'm even considering it. Resentful that I already know he wouldn't support me.
Recently, in a response about believe in infidelity, a one-off infidelity, I wrote, sparing is caring. Sometimes sparing is caring. Sometimes you don't unburden yourself to your partner, even if you feel guilty about what you're keeping from your partner. You don't shift that burden onto your partner's shoulders. You spare them, bearing the burden, and you bear that burden yourself. Not sure if that advice applies in this case, but listening to your call, that's what came to mind. Also, listening to your call, other advice that came to mind that I typically don't give in a circumstance like this is sometimes you got to do what you got to do to stay married and stay sane. And you already know how your husband is going to feel about this. You've been through this already once with your husband. So in a way, you already have his input. Do you need to get that input again? Do you need to tell him what you're going to do, the choice you've already made up your mind to make, knowing it's just going to cause discord and conflict and make you feel worse about the choice that you're making? Yeah, maybe what you need to do in order to stay married to this particular guy and stay sane in this marriage to this particular guy is just go and get that abortion and not involve him in a decision that's not his. Look, you said both partners get to have a say. I don't think that's true. Both partners, I think, if the male partner is informed that his female partner has an unplanned, unwanted pregnancy and has decided to terminate, he's allowed to have feelings about that, but he doesn't get a say. He doesn't get a choice. He doesn't get a veto. The decision is yours. And it sounds like you've already made it. Giving all of this advice to you, though, is kind of making me sad. You say that you love your husband. I'm going to take your word for that. You say that he loves you. But it's making me sad that you're in this marriage where you can't talk to your husband about this circumstance that you find yourself in because of the actions and choices that you both made and took. If he doesn't want children and doesn't want you to have an abortion for religious or moral reasons, a vasectomy is not that hard to get. It's not that hard to schedule. To borrow a phrase, he hasn't been ejaculating responsibly. Credit to Gabriel Stanley Blair, terrific author, wonderful social media presence, past guest here on the Savage Lovecast. Your husband, if he doesn't want children and also doesn't want women that he's involved with, women he happens to be married to be having abortions, he needs to take some responsibility for his ejaculations. And maybe he will if you tell him. Maybe you tell him you're getting an abortion, another abortion, and that motivates him to finally go and get the vasectomy that he could have gone and gotten before you met, if he's always known that he doesn't want children. I really ache for you at this moment. I really do, because to feel like you have to sneak off and do this thing without his support, worried that if he found out he would be hurt or there would be recriminations, that's a lot. That's a lot for a person in a relationship to bear. But it's also kind of the price of admission that you knew you were paying when you got into this marriage and when you stayed in this marriage after your first abortion. Yeah, I think you have every right to terminate this pregnancy. And I think a case could be made to demonstrate your caring for your husband by sparing him this information. The only thing that really argues for sharing this with him, because, argues against it, that you already know how he feels about it, but that's not going to change the decision you're ultimately going to make. The thing arguing for telling him is that maybe it'll motivate him to go get a vasectomy already.
This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. Oh my God, you guys, my band is totally going on tour, but we need to figure out a way to sell tickets. And it's really complicated and nobody has any time to deal with this because usually our trombone player handles this, but he's really busy with his other band. So we can't count on him to set up. Oh, hold on. Deep breath. We can use Squarespace to set up our ticketing. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform designed to help you stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just starting out or scaling your business, Squarespace gives you everything you need to claim your domain, showcase your offerings with a professional website, grow your brand, and get paid all in one place. Squarespace gives you everything you need to offer services like ticketing. From consultations to events and experiences, showcase your offerings with a customizable website designed to attract clients and grow your business. Get paid on time with professional on-brand invoices and online payments, plus streamline your workflow with built-in appointment scheduling and email marketing tools. And that's just a tiny taste of what Squarespace can do for you. I haven't even gotten into how slick your website can look with their graphic design tools. Squarespace is the fifth Beatle. Head on over to squarespace.com/savage for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use Savage to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/savage and use the offer code SAVAGE.
Hi, Dan. My question kind of fits in with your discussion a few weeks ago with Katie Simon about sex after sexual assault, because I accidentally hurt someone during a BDSM game. I started playing with a friend after I saw her on field, and over a few months, we had a couple of really intense and also joyous adventures. And she had also told me, without going into detail, that she had been hurt by shitty guys in the past, and I didn't really feel like it was my place to ask for more information. So at our last game, I was dunking her head underwater, and we had talked a lot about this, about safety. She had a safe word. She also was holding onto an item that she could drop to let me know to stop, and the game was going well. Towards the end, though, my mind just for a second was wandering to the next scene, and she dropped her item, and we stopped, and then I started without giving her back that item, and shit. It lasted less than a second before she pointed out what I had done. She was shocked, and I was also shocked, and this fun fantasy scenario, it suddenly became a potentially dangerous situation. And this was on top of her previous bad experiences and on top of 10,000 years of patriarchy too. Afterwards, we talked a couple of times. She was very angry at me. She had trusted me and I wasn't responsible with that trust. And I feel just awful. Part of her feels like this is a mistake. Another part of her thinks is a product of deeply ingrained misogyny. And I'm struggling with the same question myself. And I've been thinking about this for several months now, and I still feel terrible. And I lost, not just a play partner, but a friend. And I wonder if there's anything I can say to her, anything I can do to help her heal from this. I keep apologizing, but I don't think she wants to hear that anymore. And I would like to offer support without centering my own problems. I guess, what can I learn from all this? Of course, I need to be careful, but then, is it even possible to entirely avoid accidents in BDSM?
Joining me to help answer this question, the Funny Dom returns to the Savage Lovecast. The Funny Dom is the pen name of a 45-year-old daddy based in Melbourne, Australia, a longtime kink practitioner, educator, and author. Hey, Funny Dom, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me.
So, is it possible to avoid accidents in BDSM? We, of course, don't want tops running around saying, hey, accidents happen, what can you do? But can subs expect absolute perfection from doms at all times? Is that a realistic expectation on the subs part?
Absolutely not. And it's not even a directional thing, like expecting it from the top. Expecting it in general as just a kinkster is naive and is probably going to make something going wrong more likely. It's much healthier to absolutely expect at some point something could go wrong. You can't achieve absolute safety in kink. There is risk involved. That's part of it. And you need to not only have that balanced point of view, but also be ready to cut yourself and your partner some slack when you're doing something that is quite risky, which also means thinking more about whether you want to do something that's very risky. Like as soon as you involve not just breath play, which is very risky, but you bring water into it, so drowning really is the risk there. If this person swallows water into their lungs, that's drowning. That's what drowning is. So that's very dangerous. That's a huge risk. So the first biggest issue here is not necessarily about who did something wrong or whether she should be angry or anything to do with misogyny. It's really about, do you want to do this? Do you really want to take this amount of risk? Now, they had the visual aid that she was holding something as well as a safe word. That's great that they've tried to be risk aware and have precautions, but there still is going to be the strong possibility of, maybe he forgets because he's a human being, not necessarily because he's a man. He's a human being. He forgets to put that thing back in a hand and they restart. That's a simple, easy mistake that has massive consequences. And that's what they need to sit down and talk about. They have to have a conversation about, okay, what could go wrong here? What if I forget to put that back in your hand? Or what if you forget to drop it? What if your hand flexes and contracts and you turn your hand into a fist out of anxiety and you don't drop it? You actually clench it more. Like these are all things that could go wrong. And then you might be a bit more ready to deal with that moment of panic when something does go wrong because you've talked about it and you've got a little bit more trust. I think this guy feeling terrible and blaming himself in terms of his gender and society and his partner being upset at him, if she is, I don't know, that's what he says, is unnecessary. I think that this shows is these two people maybe weren't ready to just take this amount of risk, and she mentioned trauma in her past. If you've got some trauma, maybe doing a doubly risky type of kink play might be something you're not ready for. Maybe step back and do something a bit less risky for now.
I want to tell him to feel appropriately awful. He let his mind wander to what comes next. He literally took his eye off the metaphorical ball. She had a ball in her hand. He took his eye off the metaphorical ball, didn't return the ball to her hand. However, she was able to point that out to him right away. It was only a split second, so she wasn't gagged or in any other way incapable of still communicating with him other than the ball. Like if the stakes had been, there's no other way for her to communicate except dropping the ball, him neglecting to return that ball to her hand would have been a much bigger error. But there were kind of a backup here in which she was still able to communicate. That said, accidents happen, and I hate to say that in the context of hardcore BDSM play, because what we don't want are shitty, inept, careless, sometimes malicious doms who hurt people and then want a pass because accidents happen. Like,
No.
accidents happen, but you should do everything in your power to make sure they do not happen.
Exactly. One of my favorite people here in Melbourne, Kitty Catastrophe, I heard this first from her. We all know RAC, you risk-aware, conscious kink. She said to me, there's also RASH, risk-aware shit happens. And I think that's important. It's not the shit happens first. It's risk-aware, so be aware, do your work, do your best, and then acknowledge that shit does happen. Because we are human and things will happen, like you say. But you have to be risk-aware first. You have to do that first acknowledgement, that first due diligence has to be done. So it's not a loophole, it's an acknowledgement of human error and compassion, and we have to allow each other to have these mistakes happen and to get better, to learn from them and to do better. Otherwise, we're all just going to be blaming each other, and it's just going to be nasty, and more bad things will happen because we'll be so scared of making a mistake that we'll make a mistake, because that's what humans do.
Yeah, and everyone always takes the sub side in a moment like this. I imagine that this, if you were the dom and the sub couldn't hear your apology, couldn't acknowledge that you course corrected immediately, couldn't then game out with you like where it went wrong and how to control for that in the future with you again if they want to feel safe playing with you again, or with others, or how you'll course correct so if you play with others you don't make the same mistake again, and then move past it, that of course this would be more traumatizing for the sub who went through this physically taxing, scary experience, but it could also be a little traumatizing for a dom.
Absolutely.
To have all responsibility and blame heaped on him, and for there not to be a willingness to recognize that shit happens. Mistakes sometimes happen, even with hyper-skilled players in kink. And yeah, if you have no tolerance for risk and you're into kink, you should stick to erotica and not actual play.
I mean, when you're dealing with edge play, that's what this is. Not edging, which is fun and pretty safe, but actual edge play. You're involving your respiratory system and you're bringing in another element, water, which is really dangerous. You've got to think, are we ready for this? Like, this is not, is it the dom's fault or who's more traumatized? They're equally responsible. And this is a high-risk situation. And if you're going to jump out of a plane with one parachute, you'd want to be ready. You'd want to be someone who jumped out of a plane 100 times, knew how to do that and was very aware of how risky this is, So I think
interesting to know, and he doesn't mention whose idea this play was. Was it a fantasy of hers or a fantasy of his? Was it something that they were exploring together both as novices for the first time? Or is it something that she's done with others and wanted to experience again, or she's fantasized about, or was this his fantasy? I do think the onus shifts more onto the person whose idea it was, perhaps, especially if it was the dom's idea, to make sure that the execution of that idea, if it's high risk edge play, is as close to perfect as a human being can get. Because the amount of trust you're asking someone to invest in you, if you're the one into this drowning scene as a dom, is just enormous. And so I think that's material, and the caller doesn't mention that, and I would just put that in the caller's head. If this was his idea, I think a little bit more of the feel bad should belong to him, but I don't think he belongs on the metaphorical rack for the rest of his life. Not risk-aware consensual kink rack, the metaphorical rack, the torture device, which is not metaphorical. Some kinksters actually have racks.
You've got to be careful.
Yeah. So caller, I want you to feel bad enough that you will carry this in the back of your head into future experiences and not make the same mistake again, and think through future play scenes to control for similar sorts of errors, but not take the responsibility for not 2,000 years of misogyny. I think human beings have been going through misogyny for 10, 12,000, 15,000 years. Yeah,
I don't think there's anything to do with misogyny or the patriarchy in this particular call. This is two people that chose a bad movie to go see together, and whoever idea it was to see this bad movie, it was their idea, but they agreed to see it together. and it didn't go well and it was terrible and they wasted their night, and there's no point pointing fingers. There's only a point getting better.
The Funny Dom. Follow him on Instagram. That's an order at The Funny Dom Returns. He's the author of 3 books now. The Funny Dom's Guide to Kink, Volume 1 and 2, the Daddy Edition. His first work of fiction, a very kinky fairy tale, a dark kink romance, is out now. The Funny Dom, thank you so much for coming back on the Savage Lovecast. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you, the Dan Savage. Thanks for having me.
Snoring, hogging the covers, tossing and turning, these are problems in the bedroom that Hims can't help you with. But when it comes to performance issues between the sheets, like ED, performance issues that can strike you between the sheets, or on top of the sheets, or on top of the dining room table, or in the playroom, when it comes to that, Hims has got you covered. Through Hims, you can access personalized prescription treatments for ED like hard mints and Sex RX plus climax control. Hims offers access to ED treatment options that cost 95% less than brand names. New Sex RX plus testosterone support includes tadalafil for better bedroom performance and zinc for testosterone support. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you if appropriate. Just fill out an intake form on their site and connect with a medical provider who can determine if treatment is right for you. The process is 100% online, which means no office visits and no pharmacy lines. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to your door for free. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/savage. Find ED treatment that's up to 95% less than brand names at hims.com/savage. Let them know the Lovecast sent you by going to hims.com/savage. Actual price will depend on product and subscription plan. Featured products include compounded drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information.
Hi, Dan and the Tech Savvy Youth. I'm a 38-year-old cis bi man in Indiana, married to a 37-year-old cis woman. We've been together over 15 years and opened our marriage 3 years ago to explore swinging and polyamory. One of my biggest kinks is oral, especially finishing that way and watching my cum be swallowed. I also love going down on a woman and giving oral as well. It's been a major part of my sexual wiring for as long as I can remember, but my wife doesn't enjoy giving oral. She's self-conscious about her technique, uncomfortable with the idea of finishing that way, and if I do accidentally finish that way prematurely, it sets off a coughing fit like she just inhaled her drink. On top of that, she doesn't really like receiving oral either. She says she gets too in her head about her hygiene, so she can't relax and enjoy it. But I absolutely love doing it, and will do it as many times as she's asked, and every time we've met with other partners, I do it enthusiastically for as long as they'll let me. Now here's where it gets tricky. She has a steady partner outside of our marriage, basically since we opened up. They've been together about 3 years now, and he lives an hour away in a more liberal city, and is frankly the kind of guy she had described as her ideal back when they were dating. I've always felt a bit more like he's the alternative universe version of the life she could have had if we hadn't got together. With him, she says she loves receiving oral. She lets him go down on her for 45 minutes or more. Now, obviously, before they meet up, she showers, shaves, preps for the date, but she'll openly talk about how good he is at it. She gives him oral enthusiastically, too, something she's never really done with me. In almost 18 years together, she's finished me that way maybe 3 times, and only ever by accident anyway. What I'm struggling with is I feel like he gets the side of her I don't. When I ask about it, she shrugs and says things like, well, I let you, and okay, I'll try and do more, but nothing ever really changes. And if I say it feels like you give him more than you give me, she dismisses it with, no, it's just different. I suspect part of the reason she avoids receiving oral from me is because she knows I'd want reciprocity then. Her other partner doesn't expect oral back. He doesn't even want to finish that way. He wants to finish from penetration. But I do, and I think that turns it from pleasure into pressure for her. Dan, I don't want to pressure her, but I also don't want to feel like I'm stuck on that dynamic where my desires are off the table and someone else gets all the stuff I crave most. I'm not finding partners in our own area. It's too rural, and this relationship is still my primary source of intimacy and kink fulfillment. So how do I talk to her about this in a way that doesn't make her shut down the way she has been? Is there a way I can shift this dynamic and find more sexual connection with her in a way that works for both of us? Thanks.
First, I want to say, it took me back to the 70s, to my tweenhood, when I was sneaking a look at the joy of sex and a sensuous woman in all of these books that came out in the 70s about sex to hear oral described as a kink. Used to be, you could read about people getting into oral, and oral being this thing couples might explore to spice up their sex lives. But of course, now oral comes standard. Any model that arrives without oral should be immediately returned to the lot. And it just took me back. So thank you for that. Thank you for taking me back. Now what I'd like you to do is put your earbuds into your wife's ears and leave the room. I'll give you a moment to do that. All right, here we go. Lady, shut the fuck up about this other guy whose dick you're sucking, whose cum you're swallowing. Why are you telling your husband about all the oral sex you're having with this other guy when you know, because you've known your husband for 18 years, that oral's his favorite thing and oral doesn't, for some reason, work with him? And I get it. I wrote a column about a year ago called headline Blow Over at savage.love in 2023, where I wrote, somebody asked if it was really common in long-term relationships, opposite sex, straight marital relationships, for oral sort of to fall away, for the wife basically to stop blowing the husband. And I wrote, it's so common, I honestly think it may not be realistic for straight men to expect frequent and or enthusiastic oral sex 2 decades into a marriage, particularly if we're talking about blowjobs to completion and not a little oral as foreplay. I also invited women out there in my readership. Actually, you can put your husband back on. You can go away. Invited women out there in my readership who like to suck dick, who used to suck their husband's dicks, who don't suck their husband's dicks, to write in and explain why. And got so many great comments. Blowjobs are fantastic. I love giving them. At this point, I'd rather give a stranger a blowjob than my husband. Other people writing in to point out that this is something that you may feel more motivated to do at the start of a relationship. You just want to inhale that other person's dick. A gay guy wrote in about his relationship with his husband, who used to suck his dick just right off his body, tear it out at the root, doesn't do that anymore. He wrote in to say, if you want to see your spouse suck dick like they used to, watch your spouse suck somebody else's dick, and you will see that. However, in your relationship, oral was never big with your wife, and maybe there's just something chemical, or like he's not attracted to you in that way, but she is attracted to this other guy in that way. And sucking his dick does for her something that sucking your dick has never done for her and is never gonna do for her. And you're gonna have to grieve that and work a little harder to find an outside partner who wants to suck your dick off. And you are a bi guy. If you were a straight guy, it would be hard to find women who just want to like suck a dude's dick. They're out there. Your wife's one of them, just not your dick. But finding guys who want to suck your dick, even in rural areas, have you gotten on Scruff? Very popular with cocksuckers in rural areas. Not that hard. You need to do a little bit more legwork, third legwork, and go find the guys who want to suck your dick the way you want your dick sucked. And I'm sorry that your wife won't or can't meet this need for you as enthusiastically as she seems to be meeting this need for this other guy. And you're actually giving her the gift of being able to live in that alternative timeline where like maybe they could have been together, but she's with you and she still chooses you. And because of you, she can have everything your marriage is about, have the sex with you that she enjoys, and have him too. And experience and enjoy other things with him, but she needs to, oh my God, she needs to shut the fuck up. Why do you know in granular detail everything about the sex that she enjoys with him? If that's just going to salt a wound, if that's just going to make you feel bad, she should be considerate enough to run you, at least where oral is concerned, on a need-to-know basis, and you do not need to know this. Put your wife back on. Lady, shut your fucking mouth. Put your husband back on. Dude, go find some guys who want to suck your dick. They're out there, even in rural areas, especially in rural areas. Have you heard of the Baptist Church? All right, time for listener feedback. First up, a few comments listeners left in the comment threads about last week's show at savage.love. Says Evie Blau, Dan, I think you missed the point of the question from the lesbian caller who was unsure about sleeping with trans women. She didn't seem to be sure of having a genital preference. Rather, she seemed unsure about what to expect and didn't want to hurt anyone through her ignorance. I'm mystified why the zine Fucking Trans Women by Mira Bellwether has never been brought up here. It's a wonderful zine made by a trans woman in 2010, which you can buy at fuckingtranswomen.org. Sadly, Mira has passed away, but proceeds go to her partner. It's a wonderful personal account, Eva continues, of Mira's experiences and shares a lot of very helpful knowledge. It never came up because I wasn't aware of this zine that was published 15 years ago. I am aware of it now, and I have you to thank for that, Evie. Says Data Diva, regarding the 50-something dating the 20-something. I'm in my early 40s, and when men my age or older date women that young, my issue isn't that I'm jealous of the younger women. I'm worried for them. Large age gap relationships occasionally turn out okay, but they are a lot more likely to have abusive elements. I look back at myself at that age, and I think of the older guys hitting on me, and it bothers me a lot more now than it did then. As I've said before, relationships with large age gaps are indeed likelier to have abusive elements, as you put it, Data Diva, or power imbalances that could be consciously or subconsciously exploited or leveraged, which is why I've always said that age gap relationships should come in for a higher degree of scrutiny, and that the older person in that age gap relationship should welcome the additional scrutiny. Finally, says Barb Wren, regarding the caller with the broken tongue, they could have a tongue tie. This is often diagnosed in infants and then cut or lasered to release the lingual frenulum. Tongue tie can affect breast/chest feeding, speaking, and sleep apnea. It can also be physically impossible to fully extend your tongue if you have tongue tie. Some ENT physicians, ears, nose, throat physicians, or dentists can diagnose and treat it. Thanks for pointing that out, Farb Wren. I want to point out that the New York Times did a series about tongue tie surgeries, particularly in infants, being oversold, overhyped, overperformed, overprescribed. So if it is a tongue tie issue, please read the New York Times series on tongue tie surgeries and how necessary they sometimes are, but how unnecessary they can be for others. All right, for more listener comments and to leave a written comment yourself, go to savage.love, click on the latest Lovecast or column or struggle session, scroll down to the bottom, and join the conversation. And now, some of the voicemails Savage Love listeners left on our answering machine this week.
Hi Dan, this is a response to the podcast 975 where you had Gina Martin on talking about memory hole. It was also a really interesting discussion. I did also find it a little bit weird that we've gone from one extreme, which I remember this, I was a little bit young for the early 80s, but I do remember people talking about repressed memories in the 90s and the noughties, to totally rejecting any possibility that anyone could repress a memory, especially as Gina Martin, I did some Googling, doesn't seem to be a therapist or psychiatrist herself. So she's actually talking about the work of quite high-profile therapists and discrediting them because she wrote a thriller. Just wanted to prod that a little bit. Like, she also is in that world, breathing that there's no possibility of repression. I agree, I think it's massively overused, but I also do know people who have literally had traumatic things happen to them, and I know they happened because there were police reports, and they repressed lots of details of the memory. That is a thing that can happen, and it feels a bit weird to go from one extreme, everyone was repressing terrible memories, to repression never happens, that's not how the brain works, especially from someone who doesn't study the brain. I just wanted to prod that a little bit, because I think we should be critical at both ends of this equation.
This is a response call to the person in episode 975 who is thinking about opening up their relationship and was looking for tips on dealing with jealousy. One of the things that's helped me came from the book The Ethical Slut, which I would also recommend. Their section on jealousy, at one point they talk about how jealousy is you projecting your insecurity onto your partner. So when I have feelings of jealousy, I tend to try to really interrogate them and figure out what I'm feeling insecure about, and that helps me figure out what I need to ask for from my partner, or just what I need in that moment to help get through that feeling. Also know, if you do decide to go forward, that when things go from the theoretical discussions about being open to the real and tangible things are happening, there will be lots of strong and powerful emotions that you can't really plan for, and to just give yourself lots of grace and know that the first few times will be rough, and yeah, good luck with whatever you decide to do.
Hey, Dan. I'm calling about the previous episode where a guy in his early 50s hooked up with somebody in their 20s and got thrown out of a clique as a result. I am part of a poly group where my wife and I have been together for over 35 years, and we have a boyfriend that has been with us for about 9 years or so. The thing is, our boyfriend was only 21 years old when we started dating. Yes, he is finally more than half of our age, 9 years in. Our triad is solid. We have a great relationship. Everybody is happy. And what I've discovered is that if you're a good person, you treat people fairly, you don't take advantage for any reason, such as intelligence, education, or age, everything can work out great. We are living proof of that.
And we are going to leave it there. Got a question for me? Go to savage.love/askdan and you can record and upload your question directly onto our website. Or you can make a voice memo on your very own phone and email us your question or your comment by sending it to q@savage.love. Or you can call us at 206-302-2064 and do it the old-fashioned way by leaving us a message on our answering machine. 2 weeks left to grab your discounted early bird, dirty bird tickets for the new Hump Film Fest out this fall. We've got a brand new lineup of more than 20 amazing 5-minute or less porn and dirty and erotica shorts coming your way. Grab your tickets now at a discount at humpfilmfest.com. Ticket prices go up August 1st. And if you've ever wanted to be a porn star up on the big screen like the porn stars from the golden age of art house pornography, click on submit while you're at humpfilmfest.com to find out how you can get your dirty little masterpiece into my dirty little film festival. Follow me at Blue Sky at Dan Savage. Follow me on Instagram and Threads at Dan Savage. Follow The Funny Dom on Instagram at The Funny Dom Returns. Follow Andrew Gurza on Blue Sky at Andrew Gurza and learn more about Andrew's work and get his new book at andrewgurza.com. Savage Lovecast is produced every week by Nancy Hartunian and me and Nancy and the tech-savvy at-risk youth. We will all be back at you next week on the installment of the Savage Lovecast. Thank you, as ever, for downloading.